Welcome to Marvelous Disney, the podcast that discusses the most recent doings at one of the more dynamic divisions of the Walt Disney Company, which is, of course, Marvel Entertainment. This is entertainment writer Jim Hill, and my co-host, the amazing Aaron Adams, and I are recording this week's episode on Thursday, November 17th. 1 week out from Turkey Day, and we certainly know what the Walt Disney Company is thankful for this year. Aaron, I don't know if you paid attention to last week's earnings call at Disney, which revealed that the mouse had failed to meet Wall Street's expectations in certain revenue sections, which then caused the Disney stock price to drop by 12%, which then forced Bob Chapek to reveal that the company would both be instituting a hiring freeze and a round of company-wide layoffs.
Now, before you go any further on that, was Wall Street aware of the rest of what was going on with all of Wall Street? Like the entirety of the world is down 40 to 50% on almost everything because stock market ain't been playing its game very well lately.
All true. But we've talked about David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, and how he's been trying to figure out how to get rid of the $40 billion worth of debt that his company was saddled with when the AOL Time Warner situation. And we have neglected to talk about the $70 billion that Bob Chapek was saddled with when Bob Iger decided to buy Fox.
Oh, is that why blood sacrifice keeps showing up in his Google search history? He's looking for any answer. Anything.
That man is.
What's a pig worth? Is it worth more than a goat?
It is a scary time at Disney right now, which is why but don't worry, Black Panther is coming to save us. And so Wakanda Forever opens this past weekend in North America, sells $181 million worth of tickets. Biggest domestic opening for the month of November of all time. Only Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which, again, Marvel Studios release, set out in theaters in May of this year, had a better, stronger, bigger opening in North America in 2022. That film did $187.4 million versus Wakanda Forever's $181 million. There's an old cliche to the effect of the most important word in the phrase show business is business. And part of the problem is, yes, any other studio on the planet would have been thrilled with $181 million for this Black Panther sequel. But the problem is, again, this is the Disney company whose stock price went from, in the past year, has gone from $160 a share, the high of $172 a share to $86 a share.
Right.
So basically, the stock has lost half its value. It's only with the last week with the 12% fall off, it's now selling at $93 a share.
Yeah, but it's not like if the Black Panther sequel made even $1 trillion, it would not change the share price at all of Disney because it's not like it's a personal bank account, right? It's based on how much people believe in the Disney company and then go buy a very expensive Disney piece of paper. And only then does the number change in that. So I get that they want to boost confidence in the investor, but being off by $6 million from being, and being the biggest, you just said it was the biggest movie released in that time frame of all time.
There we go for the month of November. But again, the problem is you're dealing with Wall Street financial analysts who first pivoted to, okay, so what did the original Black Panther make when it was released to theaters in February of 2018? And
before COVID. Like, they don't put any of the asterisks in these questions at all. They're just comparing. That's an orange, and it's actually a banana. It's like, well, it's a piece of fruit that you have to unwrap.
No. Again, you are not wrong. But again, the problem is when you look at $202 million in North America in February of 2018, and then you look at $181 million in November of 2022, it's like, Wall Street is like, well, that's less, and then the investor folks that I've been talking with, they're like, well, and then you have to you have to take into consideration that when the original Black Panther went into theaters in February of 2018, it was only in 4,020 theaters, whereas Black Panther Wakanda Forever, it went out into 4,396 theaters. So it's like there should have been more business with the 375 additional theaters. And
did anyone at Wall Street Street ever call a theater owner and go, hey, is everything the exact same as it was 4 or 5 years ago before? Because like I went into, obviously it was a middle of the day noon screening in the middle of a work week, right? So
Yep.
I did not expect there to be people there like at all. And there were maybe 10 or 20 max. You know, it was a pretty empty theater. However, there were still 5 other theaters that had people in it because you had the 3D version, right?
Yep.
And you had, I was in the IMAX theater, and then you had a digital version that was, you know, smaller screen, but you had the comfy recliners, and some people like that. So, I mean, you do have overall, you know, a nice group of people in there in the middle of a workday, enjoying a Black Panther movie after COVID. And the thing I think the reason why a lot of us were there is we could space out because it's reserved seating, so you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then click the button 6 seats away from someone, and not be elbow to elbow, and feel comfortable in your environment. So even right now today, when I went to go look for Black Panther tickets yesterday, it still had the ability to rent a private theater for just you for a Black Panther screening.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that started after COVID when they're like, obviously we can't fill it up full of people, and then they had nobody show up, and then they made this deal like, oh, for like $200 you can have the theater all to yourself, and you know, we'll bring your spouse and your kids, and you can feel safe because you're a unit that has to live together. And to see that still exist today, the idea that I could have rented the theater by myself, I was tempted. I really was.
Yeah. No, I get that. And sometimes when you are talking with folks who work on Wall Street, financial analysts, the way they view the universe is fascinating. I mean, for example, just yesterday when I was pulling together info for today's show, they were talking about, oh, well, now the projections are in for weekend 2 of Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And it's like, okay, looks like right now, based on advanced ticket sales and the way they extrapolate the algorithms, that it's going to pull in $71 to $72 million in North America. But again, this is how Wall Street works. It's like, now, wait a minute. Okay, let's pivot and look at how Black Panther did in February of 2018. It's like, oh, weekend number 2, that film did $111 million. So there's going to be a $40 million fall off between what the original Black Panther made in 2018 versus what the Wakanda Forever is going to make this weekend. And it's never mind that if you actually look at the box office projection and it's like, okay, yeah, the business for Black Panther Wakanda Forever is going to fall off by 60% for weekend number 2. Which, by the way, is the standard now for a big blockbuster box office. You do an amazing opening weekend, then the business falls off by 60%. In fact, anything below that is trouble, but it's like, oh, it just fell off by 60%. That's par for the course. But what Wall Street is doing now is like, okay, look at what happened with the original Black Panther. It was number 1 at the box office for 5 weekends in a row back in 2018. And by the way, Aaron, the last film to do that was James Cameron's Avatar back in 2009. So you're going to take that freakish box office standard, and I get it. This is the sequel to that movie, so you want it to do the same business, but it's like your banana, apples, and oranges comparison there. This was, the original was released in February. This is being released in November, which so many holiday films come out in the same window of time, including, by the way, in just less than 1 month's time, James Cameron's sequel to Avatar, The Way of Water. So it's like, this was never going to line up the exact same way. But that never stopped Wall Street from, and that's the thing. You have a movie that made $181 million in North America right now, and all people can talk about is like, oh, that's not what we expected. It should have done better, and oh, well, I guess the Disney stock price is going to stay.
No, wait a minute. I got to back that up. The people at Disney who are perfectly aware that the lead actor of the movie that the movie is named after has passed away, and they went ahead and they made a movie featuring the name of the main character, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And then they put the word forever in the title, which is almost borderline insulting after the man passed away. And then they make a movie without the main character, and then they expect it to exceed. I mean, Chadwick Boseman was loved, practically revered. And I've always thought that they're going to have a hard time with this movie. Turns out I was wrong, fantastically wrong. But yeah, I mean, they have such high expectations, even when all of the dominoes are set to fall against them.
Yep.
And and then to have it do so very well by any standard, and then hang your head in shame and go, well, that was a complete failure. We might as well just blow the whole thing up, guys. I mean, it's silliness.
Well, it is. But at the same time, so much of this is kind of the narrative that's out there about Bob Chapek right now. In a weird sort of way, it's people looking for new clubs to hit Bob Chapek with. And this one being, oh, well, Black Panther Wakanda Forever didn't do as well as the original Black Panther, which, and that's where we are right now.
You know what it sounds like? It sounds like that whiny teenage girl that goes, gold, Daddy? Gold? I wanted platinum. And then she storms off crying because she didn't get platinum. She only got gold. Daddy didn't love her enough. That's what it sounds like, right?
It's again, you're not wrong. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, folks. Aaron and I will be sharing our thoughts about Black Panther Wakanda Forever on the second half of today's show. But first, of course, we have our news portion. And as always, the news here at Marvelous Disney is brought to you by Storybook Destinations, trusted travel partner of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. For a worry-free travel experience every time, please book online at StorybookDestinations.com. So to sort of circle back to the current situation, that we had Disney announce that because of what's going on with the stock price, there were going to be hiring freezes, there were going to be cutbacks and layoffs, and every part of the company is expected to do its part. Which brings us now to the television animation side of things over at Marvel. Now, you have a wonderful show for Disney Plus, Marvel What If, which actually got nominated for a number of Primetime Emmys last year. You also have the announced and highly anticipated X-Men 97, likewise Devil Dinosaur, which on the retail side of Disney, they are losing their mind over Devil Dinosaur. They just anticipate we are going to sell so much merch to little girls on this show. So you'd think this would be an arm of the company that would be safe. It's a proven moneymaker. They regularly deliver well-reviewed shows. They get strong ratings. This is why just yesterday, folks in the industry were shocked to hear that staffers at Marvel Studios had been told, per the cost-cutting orders that had just come down from the corner office at Disney, they shouldn't necessarily count on there being, well, for starters, a season 2 of Spider-Man freshman year. And the interesting thing is, Spider-Man sophomore year had already officially been announced this past July at San Diego Comic-Con as part of Marvel's Hall H presentation. Same thing supposedly applies to season 2 of Marvel's Zombies and a season 3 of Marvel What If. Look, a lot of folks out in California, and not to mention the places overseas where a lot of this animation is sent to be done, we're counting on these gigs, especially given what's just been going on, across the way at Cartoon Network and thereabouts. But Chapek, in a company-wide memo, which was released after the markets closed back on Veterans Day, said, we are going to have to make tough and uncomfortable decisions. As we work through the evaluation process, we will look at every avenue of operations and labor to find savings. And we do anticipate some staff reductions as part of this review.
Now, this is, if we were doing a video podcast right now, this is where I'd insert the clip of the villain from Roger Rabbit holding the shoe over the... We need to get rid of some cartoons, guys. Oh. Where's that Spider-Man kid? Here, into the vat. Bloop. Okay, next.
God. And now I have to say, I've been working the phones largely because, again, Drew and I are going to be doing a new fine-tuning later this week, and obviously this is the animation side of the street. And what I've been trying to find out is what exactly is going on. Is this the equivalent of what, say, happened with the original season of Marvel What If? Remember how they were going to do 10 episodes, but then they had COVID-related production delays, and it's like, okay, we can only do 9.
Right.
So are we talking about trimming 1 or 2 episodes off of a show, or is what people have been hearing about, yeah, we may not even do season 2 of Spider-Man freshman year?
Was Homecoming very first of the movies.
Yep.
What year of school was he supposed to have been in at that point? Because they did the trip to D.C. and then the next year of school, so that's either senior and junior or junior and senior years, and then freshman year would be the cartoon, and then sophomore year season 2 was supposed to be the next cartoon. You can't have a third season after that.
Well,
that's when you get
again,
into the
you're
movies.
making the assumption that this keys off of the Tom Holland thing. As I understand it, they different animals. And now what's kind of interesting about this is that Bob Chapek has asked, that everybody do this. And so Kevin Feige wants to be a good soldier, a good corporate citizen. But there's a reason that Kevin Feige wants to be a good corporate citizen, because at the same time, he is supposedly prepping what will be the most expensive movie that Marvel Studios has ever produced in its history, and that will be Avengers: Secret War. And just so we're clear here, we are surprisingly close to when Avengers: Secret War is supposed to arrive in theaters. That's May of 2026, which is 3 years and change. That's almost the same distance that we are now from the film that Kevin Feige is trying to compete with, which is Avengers: Endgame. When anybody thinks about Avengers: Endgame, there's that end battle at the compound in upstate New York, where you have Thanos and his army face off against every Marvel character that's in the MCU up until that time.
Well, it's super easy to solve that problem. For the Secret Wars, you just do, because we now have time travel, you have everybody who's new to the MCU in Phase 4 go jump in a time portal, and then when Cap is almost ready to be defeated, and he hears, on your left, we replay the scene, except 10 new heroes step out alongside of him. And Thanos also gets some new baddies like Kang and whomever else we get along the way. And we just replay the whole scene now with 30 extra people. Is that how they're going to do it?
Well, actually, Feige has an intriguing idea, supposedly. I mean, again, and this is, I have to tell you, by the way, all of this information is coming back channeled because, in fact,
he didn't email you directly?
Hogwash. No, I mean, what's so funny is that if you talk with people at Marvel and you bring up Secret War, they actually make the Animal House joke. It's like, oh, no. Everything associated with that project is under double secret probation. I mean, it's just sort of like security beyond security. Because again, there's a number of folks at Marvel who believe that, look, it didn't hurt the box office at all of Spider-Man No Way Home, that a couple of months out, a very persistent drumbeat to the effect of, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are going to be with Tom Holland in this film. And, and all of these villains from all sorts of iterations of the movie are coming back. And it just, never mind also that, Benedict Cumberbatch is in there as Doctor Strange. And so but the thinking was that, boy, wouldn't it have been cool if on opening weekend people went to theaters and Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, oh my God, that they went in totally cold. And so supposedly that's what Feige is trying to do here. But he's supposedly reaching out. I mean, it's like, yes, we know about Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, so he's going to reach out to Nick Cage to come back as Ghost Rider? And wait a minute, that's going to be really, really awkward because Jessica Alba and Chris Evans are all going to be sitting around, and Michael Chiklis. You're going to be sitting there, and they're going to be hearing about all these people from all the Marvel Universe movies are coming back, and none of them get the invite. And they're like, I wonder why none of the Fantastic Four cast got an invite. And then the guys from the reboot of Fantastic Four, they're like, hey, did you guys hear that they brought Nick Cage back for Ghost Rider? Oh, well, surely we'll get an invite. And crickets. They're like, why didn't we get an invite? We're Fantastic Four. And Feige's like, I got a real Fantastic Four over here, exit stage right. And then they bring in the new cast, but everybody else in the MCU they're going to bring back. Is that the game plan? Because that seems really insulting.
I mean, what's fascinating about first of all, I don't know if you saw the story that broke earlier this week in regard to Fantastic Four, and this is an interesting bend on where that project may go, that evidently what Feige has decided to do is like, this is going to be a 1960s story. this is when this comic book started. We have done the original Captain Marvel was a story that was told in the 80s. We did our Captain America story. We started that pre-World War I, or so World War II, so late 30s, early 40s. And so it's like we haven't done the 60s yet. And wouldn't it be interesting to have these characters in the 60s and then the very thing you were talking about, the notion of we have time travel, we have the multiverse, we can bring characters in from different time periods. So just this week, that bubbled up. But to double back to what you were saying about, and quite seriously, that the notion is, it's like, what Feige wants to do is like, wouldn't it be cool if, for example, if, say, Kelsey Grammer came back as the Beast from the 20th Century Fox version of the X-Men movies. And sort of the idea is to continually blow people's minds by having Marvel characters that from all of the movies that have been done to this point. Bring them in for Secret War.
It is the most brilliant thing in the world, because as soon as you see Kelsey Grammer, you immediately go, oh, I have to go back and watch was it X3 that he was in? Or X2 or whatever. It was one of the first 2 or 3 of the original. So you got to go back and buy that, which probably hasn't had a spike in sales. No, legitimately, because that happens where you'd work at the video store, and the day that the movie comes out, wiped off the shelves. Can't hang on to it for weeks at a time. And then finally one day you get a new supply, you put them on the shelves, and not a damn one sells for like the next 30 months, and now you've got 500 copies of X2 sitting on your shelf because the peak is over. And nobody, everyone's got a copy. They don't need a copy. They're not gifting it. There's other movies that have come out and they just don't care about that moment anymore. So if you bring in Kelsey Grammer, I guarantee you that X2, if that was the movie that he showed up in, will sell like 5 million copies the next day. And all of a sudden, your revenue stream just gets a little shot in the arm because you paid Kelsey Grammer $10,000 for a 20-second cameo.
It's so interesting you bring up like physical DVD, Blu-ray sales, because just based on the past weekend of what Black Panther Wakanda Forever did, there were immediate conversations. Okay, so when is this film going to show up on Disney Plus? With the notion of, okay, for example, last year, Encanto opens up Thanksgiving weekend and was available for viewing on Christmas Day on the subscription streaming service. And what Disney already is sort of putting out there, it's like, don't expect that. Do not expect that with the Black Panther sequel. That it will show up on Disney Plus at some point in 2023, quite likely just before Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania opens in early February. But again, part of the agenda here is like, don't hold off on seeing Black Panther Wakanda Forever because it's going to show up on Disney Plus in 4 weeks. That's not going to happen. If you want to see this movie, go to the theater. Anyway, to double back to Secret Wars for a moment, remember, Frank Waldron, who wrote season 1 of Loki and then went on to write Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. He is the gentleman who is writing the script for Secret War. And the order that came down from Kevin is like, look, I need this thing to be loose enough so that if somebody agrees to come do a cameo, that we can insert that character.
Right.
So
drag and drop. It's basically Kevin's asking, can I drag and drop Kelsey Grammer into the scene right here? And then you hear the little mouse click and there's a blue Kelsey going, I hypothesize that if we do this, we could probably gain some extra XP on this mission.
Well, again, I don't think you're wrong in that case. I just picture, poor Mr. Waldron in a room, surrounded by whiteboards and a rainbow,
of strings leading off of. And then if we happen to he can come in here and say possibly this. But if he doesn't, we go off on this branch and the storyline goes this way instead. Right.
Okay. Just to take a situation that's already complicated and further complicated. Remember, we also have Imagineering working on the Battle with King Thanos Super Deluxe e-ticket, which is supposed to, and again, remember, the idea is that Secret War is supposed to end the multiverse saga. So Imagineering, in much the same way that when they were shooting Guardians of the Galaxy 3, or for that matter, during Guardians of the Galaxy 2, they shot the footage for Mission Breakout. During production of Guardians of the Galaxy 3, they shot the footage for Cosmic Rewind. And Imagineering is looking at, you're going to have all these people come through the door to do Secret Wars. And we are raising our hand now that when they come through and are doing these cameos, we would like to also build in time to grab some shots of these people as well. And evidently Feige is like, I am trying to not have a Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield situation.
Right, to where everyone knows beforehand.
And that's it exactly. How do you keep this secret?
Meanwhile, like in Imagineering, because they want to create, like when Moon Knight comes out, well, they want to have a character of Moon Knight walking around in the parks the next day, right? So they've got Imagineers going, all right, Ghost Rider's in, everybody. And you're like, well, how do we, I get the skull, but how do we set it on fire and have it walk around the park? I don't know, that's going to be a challenge. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, Kelsey Grammer's coming in with the blue costume. And you're like, oh man, the Florida heat, how do we ventilate a person wearing fur? And they're like, oh, by the way, animated Spider-Man, we need one of them walking around there. They're like, you hear the brakes screech. Excuse me? Animated Spider-Man. How do we do animated Spider-Man walking around the park? They're like, I don't know, guys. I just got the call. I don't know how you do it, but
there we go. And speaking of Spider-Man, just earlier this month, the folks over at Applause put out a brand new book called With Great Power, How Spider-Man Conquered Hollywood During the Golden Age of Comic Book Blockbusters. By the way, this is written by Sean O'Connell, who is the managing editor over at Cinema Blend, that entertainment news website. This literally showed up in the mail, folks. So this is kind of my treat for the coming weekend to dig into this 300-page hardcover. But I cracked this open this morning out ahead of today's show to find a sample story. This is a story that starts in September 2019, which is 39 days after Sony severed ties with Disney. Remember how, suddenly on the heels of Endgame being a huge success, suddenly Sony and Disney weren't going to be working together anymore, and that meant no more Spider-Man and the MCU and all that, and everybody was upset. And so during this time, Tom Holland asks for Bob Iger's email address because he figures, well, I'm going to stop working for Disney, and these people have changed my life. So I wanted to say thank you. So Holland sends this note to Bob Iger, and a couple of weeks later, he and his family are out at a pub. And Tom is like 3 drinks in at this point, and the phone rings, and he's looking at the ID on the phone, and it's Bob Iger. Finally now calling him back, and it's like, and he's having a debate with his dad in the pub. Well, do I pick this up? Because I'm kind of drunk. And his dad's, no, you got to pick this up. You got to say hello. But he said, I was really upset that I wasn't going to be in the MCU anymore. And Bob Iger listens to this kid in the pub, 3 beers in, who's being so passionate. First of all, thanking him profusely for signing off on him being Spider-Man, and really enjoyed being part of this movie and really enjoyed making these films with him. And it's just such a shame. And isn't there a way to fix this deal? I spoke with the importance of Spider-Man in the MCU and what I could offer and what I could bring to the table. And I think that really resonated with him. So, in a weird sort of way, we have what we have now with Spider-Man, which, by the way, you may have seen the word earlier this week that evidently Sony and Tom Holland have come to an understanding, which will allow him to do a new trilogy for that studio, but at the same time be free to go across the street and work in MCU films. We have that because Tom Holland picked the phone up when he was 3 pints in, and right. Talked up Bob Iger, which I love, which makes me want to dig even further into with great power. The problem is when you Google with great power, there's actually the first book that comes up is the Stan Lee story.
Sure, yeah.
Seriously, folks, if you're considering chasing down this hardcover, which, by the way, Amazon right now has available for 10% off its suggested retail. But again, it's with great power, and make sure after that it's How Spider-Man Conquered Hollywood, not the Stan Lee story. Don't get me wrong, probably a fine book. But speaking of retail-related things, there'll be a commercial in a moment. And then when Aaron and I return, we will talk about Black Panther: Wakanda Forever.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Introducing Meta Ray-Ban Display, the world's most advanced AI glasses. With a full color display built into the lens of the glasses, it's there when you need it and gone when you don't. Send and receive messages, translate or caption live conversations, collaborate with Meta AI, and more. Be one of the first to try Meta Ray-Ban Display. Visit meta.com/Meta Ray-Ban Display to book a demo and find your pair.
Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Big movie, long movie. In fact, running time of 2 hours and 41 minutes. And Black Panther, Wakanda Forever's path to the screen was pretty tough. The original film comes out February of 2018 and makes a buttload of money, $1.3 billion. So, of course, Disney is going to make a sequel of sorts to Black Panther. In fact, that gets officially announced at the D23 Expo in August of 2019. And at that time, Black Panther 2 was going to be released to theaters on May 6th of this year, 2022. So, and remember, May is the start of summer blockbuster season now. So that was the plan. However, we jump ahead just 7 months, and suddenly it's March of 2020. Pandemic disrupts all of Hollywood, and Wakanda Forever's original release date, May 6, 2022, gets pushed back to July 8th of that same year. So it's still a summer blockbuster, but now it's in the middle of summer. And then August 2nd of 2020, we lose Chadwick Boseman to colon cancer. And evidently Ryan Coogler got the news just as he was finishing the original screenplay for Black Panther 2.
I just read a story very recently that he was able to deliver a finished screenplay to Chadwick before Chadwick passed. However, Chadwick was not able to physically read the screenplay. And that was the thing that really got Ryan choked up, was that, you know, he was able to deliver finished work. However, it wasn't able to be appreciated by Chadwick before he was gone.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, filming was originally supposed to begin in March of 2021. Got pushed off by 3 months to accommodate Ryan's need to rewrite. It's still a geopolitical thriller, and it was always supposed to bring Namor to the MCU canvas. In fact, fascinating that Universal had the movie rights for this Marvel character, acquired them in 1990. They reverted to Disney Marvel at some point in 2014. Kevin Feige, in an interview, just sort of casually passed it off, and we just got Namor back. But it took another 5 years. There were some tangential rights issues. I want to say, when did Captain America Winter Soldier come out? Because isn't there a throwaway in, you know, they're talking about the...
Oh, yeah, it comes up on the monitor that there is like some sort of seismic activity in the Atlantic Ocean.
That's it, exactly.
That was 2014 when it came out.
Well, isn't that bizarre that they supposedly acquired the rights in 2014 and suddenly we get our first reference to the Submariner then? You know how Marvel Studios loves its Easter egg, so it just I think it's kind of significant, at least to me, that if that was the year they acquired it and then they drop it in Winter Soldier, that's kind of cool. Yep. Anyway, so filming starts June 29th of last year. And then on August 25th, Letitia Wright is injured on set. They're doing a stunt at night in Worcester, Massachusetts. This whole production was put on hiatus on November 19th of last year, so Letitia could finally step away and fully recover. I mean, they shot as much of the film as they could with all of the scenes around Shuri, but it was just,
Right.
the whole notion of this woman is kind of the center pole of the movie. So it wasn't until mid-January of this year that they were finally able to pick up again, and they did a full 4 weeks of reshoots. Problem was with this additional issue, with her injured. This was at the point in October of last year where it was announced that we had our third release date for Black Panther. We have now pushed the film off from July 8th, 2022 to November 11th. And folks I spoke with the studio, just this whole notion of, wow, we are doing a story about loss and mourning that we've now pushed off to a late fall release date. And it's like, what is this going to do to our box office potential? In fact, again, to bring things full circle to what we were talking about earlier in the show, a number of the financial analysts that I've chatted with suggested flat out, it's like, look, if this film had opened in May or July of last year, or July of this year, excuse me, that $20 million separation between what the original Black Panther made in 2018 and what Wakanda Forever made this past weekend wouldn't exist. This is the sort of movie that would have done that much better at the box office if it had been released in May or July. But again, November was when, with all of the troubles between Chadwick's passing and Letitia's injury on set, and the need to rewrite the script. I mean, this is where they landed. So, all right. So talk to me. What did you think of the film?
Well, before I actually get into it, I need a point of reference from you specifically. When you were in the theater, was it so incredibly painfully loud to listen to at any point?
We actually had the opposite experience. In fact, we went to the AMC Tingsboro down in Massachusetts, and we were in a situation, much like you, we saw an afternoon matinee, myself, Nancy, and we brought a friend with us. And the dialogue was so muffled at some points. And also, to be honest, I felt like the projector, there was some sort of problem with the projector, because there were a lot of scenes in this film that are set at night or in caves or underwater. And it was just one of these things where I kept having to lean forward to either try to read lips or peer into the murk to figure out what's going on. And I got to tell you that, Nancy and I just this past weekend got delivery on a brand new flat screen. And there was a part of me, it's like we were driving home and it's like, oh man, I can't wait till this is available on Disney Plus so I can fire it up on our super sharp, brand new flat screen, 55-inch, and turn on the closed captioning. I wanted to like this movie more than I did, but I think, to be honest,
It was
I
the
have
fault
to.
of the theater, mostly.
Yeah, that's it
okay.
exactly.
All right.
So,
Similar in my case, then, because as I was in the theater, I wanted to beat the sound mixer with a sack of nickels. I was just angry about the sound mix because it was painfully loud to the point where I wanted to leave because I felt that my ears would be ringing after the movie was over. And there's a general rule, okay, so you've got your low sounds, your mid-range sounds, and your high sounds, but if you do like all of it as loud as you can all at once, it just becomes noise. And that's when you can't discern, is that a wave crashing? Is that a bone breaking? Is that a person screaming? It's just noise. And there were a lot of times where the detail was just lost to noise and of too much in the mix in that moment. I could point to, like, Lord of the Rings. There's a really good example of this concept in the Two Towers movie when an elephant comes charging towards the camera and it's the feet, the boom, 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 boom. Well, if you watch the film and listen very, very carefully, they only put in the sound effects of the front 2 feet of the elephant, because if you put in 4, it becomes too much. But if you do the front 2, it goes boom, 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 boom. And that charging at you sound is much more menacing than right? So there are times you have to decide, I've got too much crap in my mix, I have to take something out. And once you're aware of that as a stylistic choice of a sound mixer, there'll be times where you'll be able to watch a war movie and they'll like maybe have a large explosion and you get that high pitch of the hearing of the character go, but all the sound kind of fades out. And like you'll see explosions, but you won't hear explosions, things like that, right? That's a way that you can have like so much chaos going on where if you pull out the sound, you get a different effect. Now, I'm going to expand on pulling out the sound by going to the very opening of Black Panther, because as soon as we find out that we have lost our king, the Marvel logo comes up without a fanfare. Just wind, silence and wind. And Jim, I mean, I could like have a secret word to reveal to the audience and try and make you guess it and go, what did you feel when it was just the wind and no fanfare? You know, like, didn't it feel empty? Didn't it feel lonely? Didn't it feel like you've lost something?
Even with the muffled sound in the theater, that worked, and it did what it was supposed to. This is a story about loss.
Yeah, not the time for a fanfare. I mean, stylistically, when you just find out that Chadwick, you know, not Chadwick himself, but the Black Panther as a character in this fictional moment has died, you do not want, you know, you just don't want that fanfare. It's inappropriate and it's not the right thing. But that wind, it was chilling, it was lonely, it was sparse. You were fragile. You were not protected and enveloped in safe brass of heroism. You know, man, that moment, it got me in the right mental space, because what ended up happening, I believe, for the next couple of hours were moments where we got to witness the humans of the film, the people that were the actors, right? Not the characters, but the actors, got to mourn their friend on camera. I would say that those moments were true moments of a human mourning another person.
No, you're not wrong. I mean, I feel like there were some excellent choices made in that section. And again, also, we lost Chadwick in such a public way, and he had been so closely associated with the success of the first Black Panther film, and you know, again, with his introduction in Civil War. So this was clearly the path forward. That you know, you didn't have a choice.
Well, no, I don't think it was clearly the path forward. I went through, after watching the film, I had to go back and kind of Google, because I know that actors have died during the making of a film. One of the very first ones I thought of was Brandon Lee during the making of The Crow, right? And they had existing footage, and they had a lot of money invested into it, and they said, okay, we'll hire another actor to look like him, and we'll shoot around it, maybe from behind, over the shoulder kind of thing, fill in the gaps of what we don't have. Because it's a business. Remember, in the beginning of the show, you said the most important word is not show, it's business. And this is a business. And if someone dies, well, we carry on as if we just lost a freaking screwdriver. And we go, oh, is it a flathead or a Phillips? I've got another one, right? No, it's very cold, very, very cold. And then I was like, well, obviously, and I knew of others, and I had to Google, you know, movies that were completed without their lead actor, or that had a lead actor die in the process. And I was reminded about Chris Farley from Shrek. Oliver Reed, you reminded me about from Gladiator, was a mannequin.
Well, they used I want to say animatronic coupled with some digital masking. But
was it Abraham Lincoln standing up? Did it look like that for a quick second? Anyway, but there were other, Paul Walker, obviously most recently from Fast and Furious, was replaced by his brother as a stand-in, and some fancy CGI helped to pull off the finishing of that. Philip Seymour Hoffman died during Hunger Games. Digital replacement there in some cases. Harry Potter movies, you replace Dumbledore. Even within the MCU, we've mentioned many times that we had Terrence Howard, who just disagreed with. Same with Ed Norton, disagreed with Marvel, and they say, we'll go a different way, okay? So the world of show business, movie making, is cold, and not because they don't like people, but it's because they've invested hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And the fact that Chadwick passed, not even while making the darn movie, because I could understand so much more of this decision-making if he died during the making of the movie, but he died before the movie was made. And then Disney is all about, making money, and I swear to goodness gracious, they were going to replace him no other option, right? You just have to. But to have respect for the human, because Chadwick was loved not just by his co-actors, but by the general public at large. The Black Panther character meant a tremendous amount to the Black community because they finally had their superhero movie that was just, about their culture and represented them in a true, honest fashion, in a fictional way. But, it came from their culture, and they really were able to embrace it. And so when Chadwick was gone, the decision to make it that the Black Panther himself died and to do pretty much the first 90% of this movie without ever seeing a Black Panther character show up on screen was not just a bold choice, but I think it was respectful. Like, if Chadwick had the ability to see what they did in his honor, in the way that they respected him, in a way that nobody in Hollywood has ever respected an actor who's passed in that way. To honor the human that brought that character to life just blows my freaking mind that Disney, of all people, the money grubbers, would be respectful to a human soul. Oh my goodness, right? That put me in a mental state that when I watched the film, I do believe that over half of this film is allowing us, the audience, as well as the actors, to mourn the loss of that human soul. And I had a respect for that even while I was watching a fictional incarnation happen up on the screen. I felt true love of a human being in these moments that you couldn't have faked. You couldn't have scripted it and faked it, because it was a real thing that happened to Chadwick in this loss. So the heart that was in it, to me, is 100% true and real. And that's a good reason to go see it, is if you did love the Black Panther, if you did love Chadwick and as an actor, this is honestly almost like a church service where you get to go and mourn the loss of him, and in a respectful way, even though it's a piece of fiction about the Black Panther. So I had expectations that I don't want to say they were low. I just thought that they had so many obstacles in the way, so many hurdles to cross, that it would be very difficult to come up on the other side of this with a successful movie. Now, with all of that being said, a lot of the success, I believe, comes from the actor who portrayed Namor, because he's a sympathetic villain. He's not just here to take over the world. He's here to protect his people. They've been living in secret forever and ever, and he doesn't want people coming down interfering with their little paradise. And that's the thrust of his storyline. And the arguments they make, it's kind of like Killmonger. He was a great villain who made some great points, and you as the audience are kind of on their side going, yeah, they should kind of win in this scenario, I hope, somehow, but not quite. And they put you in this moral gray zone every once in a while. So, yeah, stylistically, all of that, I think they really did a fantastic job. I'm going to let you chat about what you liked and didn't like. And then before we end, I do want to talk just for one moment about the music of it, because that was a different challenge altogether. But I want to hear how you actually enjoyed the film itself.
In a weird sort of way, it was pretty standard Marvel Studios fare. I mean, if you think about the Martin Freeman, Julie Louis-Dreyfus character,
Sure.
Again, their interaction. What's always fun about Marvel is every dollar is up there on screen. And let's face it, if we think back on what I was just talking about, the convoluted path to, that it took for Wakanda Forever to reach the screen. If we factor in what the obvious behind-the-scenes costs were, factoring in the COVID protocols, coupled by the delays, from after Letitia Wright's injuries, and let alone, just the standard Marvel process of, okay, we've cut the movie together and, ooh, we need something there, or we need a new bit here, or that sort of thing. I'm going to be intrigued to see, when all is said and done, what either Disney or Marvel Studios is willing to put out there about what finally were the costs of this film. Because remember, at one point when they were talking about Endgame, that was over $300 million, which when you make $2 billion, it's like, okay, that was worth it. For this one, it's one of these situations where suddenly, and forgive me for introducing yet another variable here, but suddenly we have things like the limited series over at Disney Plus. And the thing is, okay, so you have a Thor Ragnarok or a Thor Love and Thunder. You have a 2-hour-long film. Whereas if we pivot and look at something like WandaVision, where you had 10 hours of television, and it's just sort of like, how do you do the same set of rules apply that what it costs to produce an hour of television versus, a 2-hour long film?
Right. They've got to have some metric of like whatever. If my ticket costs me $15 to go to the theater, and then you end up with $100 million at the end of the weekend, you can calculate how many butts in seats that equals.
Yep.
And then you can compare that to Disney Plus and that 10 hours of streaming and go, how many eyeballs watch that? And then there's some sort of dollar conversion ratio that they kind of figure out in between the two that tells them, was this the good investment or not? Right? There's got to be a comparison between the two somehow that way.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so I've interrupted your review. Please go back to it.
Well, no. I enjoyed it, but as I mentioned, this is a film I would really like to see in the privacy of my own home with a decent sound system and a bright screen to see. I want to be fair to this film, and I just feel like, given the way I saw it, and also the other thing, frankly, I was sitting in an audience full of white suburbanites on a Tuesday afternoon, whereas I would bet you watching this movie on a Saturday night with an audience that was, say, 4 decades younger, would have been that much more exciting. I feel like I saw the movie at a disadvantage.
Okay, I also feel that like my theater probably just had too much juice in the audio system because you lost clarity in the noise of it all. But I do still think that there were some points in the sound mix that were just set to max. And there's this thing called the loudness wars that exists in audio producers. It's a thing of if something is quiet, like for example, and this gets to a primal thing of how a human works. But if a thing is quiet, it could be sneaking up on you to kill you. Like back when we lived in the jungles, in the bushes and stuff. If a creature was trying to be quiet to kill you, and you heard a little twig snap, you go, "What was that? Danger." However, if someone's singing at the top of their lungs a very bright, cheerful song, you're not afraid of it because they're not trying to sneak up on you. So louder noise equals safe noise. Quiet noise equals, which is why a lot of horror movies get really quiet all of a sudden. But anyway, it was just loud. Like almost all the time, it was just fascinatingly loud on the sound mix. But beyond that, the thing I wanted to talk about the music is this is so not what you're used to. And if you watch the first Black Panther movie, it goes hand in hand perfectly with the score of the first Black Panther movie. So there's really no difference in that sense. But Ludwig Göransson, who does the score for this, he's also famous for doing the score for Mandalorian as well as 100 other sci-fi projects. He's got a very unique sound, and he's going to be like the next Hans Zimmer of conducting and composing some really great out there sci-fi stuff. People just aren't aware of him quite yet on the mainstream level, but he does fascinating work. And here in this instance, instead of getting like big heroic brass, you never once get big heroic brass in this movie when something heroic happens. You get hoots, like hoot, 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 vocalizations, and then you get some banging drums. And you're creating a new language for what audio means. And when you create a language, we've all gotten used to certain things meaning certain things. When the violins kick in, you're almost like afraid. That means horror. When the brass kicks in, it's heroic. When this happens, it means this. And Ludwig Göransson is saying, I don't want to use any of the language I would like to speak Swahili for the next 12 hours, and you're going to go along for the ride. And it works, though. There's this vocalization that happens, and because I don't speak the proper language, all I can think of as saying is, "Eh, caliente," and then putting a big reverb on it and going, doesn't that make it sound like the opening to The Lion King? And it happened like 3 times in the Black Panther show, in the Black Panther movie, where it's just like a male vocalization solo with a very large reverb on it. And every single time I felt like Lion King equals Africa equals Wakanda. It was really weird how the equation worked, but Yeah, Ludwig is doing some really crazy stuff with his scoring, but it all works, it all fits. It's very new in you're not used to this audio language, but he makes it happen where like subtly he builds it in and says this is what drama sounds like now. And when drama comes back later, when those drums kick back in, you know what it means. And then when the heroic part comes in, he's already established that earlier. So I mean, it all fits and it all works, but it's just refreshing to not be using the same old formula. So I just got to applaud the dude for bringing a new language to us and doing something different, because boy, is it needed.
Oh, I agree. But I think, again, it's also worth noting that the several times that they did that, the several times that they did Just the Wind were so effective. It was such a smart choice, and a lot of bold choices to think about. Again, this is a story about loss. This is a story about mourning. And there's a part of me that just wishes that this movie had come out in its original window of time. If it had made that May 8th date, or if it had made that July date this year. I just feel like when you get into November, the cold, darker months of the year, a story about loss and mourning, it's kind of on the nose. It's sort of like, yeah, this is the time of year where the leaves fall off the tree and it gets darker soon, and it's just sort of like, oh boy, a story about mourning and loss. Come on, let's go to the theater. Let's get some popcorn. Let's get some soda.
Now, I do want to say that the marketing team did miss the huge opportunity of having on the poster the logo or the phrase, little catchphrase that says, "You will believe that a man can fly, ... with wings on his feet."
There we go. All right, but want to talk about that end moment of this film where Namora, I want to say that but we have the scene to the effect of she's upset because she didn't like the idea of her king on his knees and bowing down to the Wakandans, and we got to see how Namor thinks, the effect of we are now a unit, we now have an alliance, and face it, the surface dwellers will be coming for Wakanda. Sort of the notion of, okay, that's an interesting piece to throw on the table, as remember, we are ending phase 4 with this film. Phase 5 begins with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania in early February. So it's like going to be interesting to see where we go from here. And the other thing that I also find fascinating is that in the new Marvel Studios take on all this stuff, our phases, instead of playing out over 4 years, are now playing out over 2 years, because the idea is, well, we also have the limited series.
That ramps up and speeds up the whole process, yeah.
And face it, one of the other things this movie did brilliantly was introduce the character of Riri Williams, who, flat out as she's walking out the door, it's like, hey, I'm going to be in Chicago. Come to a Bolts game.
And we should also mention the one thing that they also did incredibly well was the mid-credits scene.
They did.
And I think that gave people, because the whole movie, you're like, we lost Chadwick. To let Shuri sit down and then to have a little montage to remember him was very incredibly sweet. And then to get the child at the end and to know that we still have a T'Challa.
Yeah. And in fact, if you hung in there for the very end of the film, folks, this is what I love about Kevin Feige. Clearly somebody who grew up watching movies in the 70s and the 80s, because the last credit was the Black Panther will return. Just like James Bond will return.
Yep.
So speaking of returning, it is time for Aaron and I to go, folks. So, but anyway, that is our take on Black Panther Forever, and hopefully with some of the context we provided today on what's going on behind the scenes here at Disney. Just be aware that, this is how the company is kind of looking at this film now, that it's like,
as a failure.
Well, no, just as, I mean, the weird sort of thing is, for me, I literally had folks at Disney saying, well, okay, that they were in middle of the conversation. They were pivoting to talking about James Cameron's Avatar sequel, The Way of Water, and to the effect of, well, geez, maybe that will bring up the stock price. Maybe that will do giant business. And it's just sort of like, wow, again, you guys are just not happy.
Chapek needs to go back to Googling blood sacrifice and comparing goats versus chickens.
There we go. There we go. So, Aaron, if folks are looking for you on social media, want to continue the conversation, where can they find you?
Well, because Twitter is aflame and chaos right now, I'm going to be hanging out on Alta Vista bulletin boards for audio producers. You remember Alta Vista back in the, was it 90s there?
There we go.
Yeah, so, and beyond that, you can look for Azaprod on other social media, including Smoke Signals. That's a new one. You do have to be within 5 miles of my apartment to be able to see the smoke signals, but it's a very good, solid form of communication. I know it's been used in the past by others. So, yeah, just Google at Azaprod or just Azaprod. You'll either get my website or something on Twitter. Who knows? Good luck.
Okay. I am still hanging in there with Twitter. So you can find us on Twitter and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. Likewise, want to point, we do have a couple of other podcasts here at Jim Hill Media. We, of course, have Disney Dish that I do with Len Testa, the one I'm about to go record. We also have Fine Tuning, which I do with Drew Taylor. We also have Looking at Lucasfilm, which I do with Brian Gahn. And if you folks could do Aaron and I a favor here, if you could head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and recommend the show you're listening to right now. Likewise, if you really, really, really like what you heard here today, if you want to head over to Bandcamp and subscribe, that would be great. And I guess that's going to do it for Marvelous Disney this week. So thank you for listening, and Aaron and I will be back soon.